Welcome to Phazon Labs, the internet's premier Metroid Futurist podcast. I am your host, Larry the Bearded Wonder. Joining me this week is Michael Morphball Accident Brown.
Back to the old.
Yep, well, you know, old faithful always gets you by.
Uh-huh.
So, and every week we bring you a new pitch for a new Metroid game that sadly we'll probably all never get to play. So this week, Michael's got something he's bringing to the table, and as per usual, we're going to get the pitch, and then we're going to play with it, workshop it a little, and put a name on it, and slip it under Sakamoto's door at his office. And no one will know it was us, but that's okay. Silently, he'll just silently every week, he just screams, "Who's doing this?" So, what you got for us this week?
I am thinking we actually, because like you said, Metroid has really delved into the isolationist aspect of, you know, being alone in space. But I think they should push it a little further and go with a horror theme aspect, almost like a la Dead Space.
I can get behind this. So, what do you got in mind?
I'm not talking, I don't want a game, an entire game of jump scares or anything like that.
Right.
And horror is not my genre when it comes to gaming. I'll admit that freely. But I think this series would definitely lend itself to that very well and relatively easily if with the correct writers and staff involved. Like, Phazon has to make a reappearance.
Oh God, definitely.
Like
Phazon definitely leans. His design very much leans into body horror.
Yes. Well, then I want to see, like, Phazon could probably do something along the lines of. All right, here's a weird example. But did you play Batman Arkham Knight?
No, but I'm familiar.
Okay. There was an aspect, like, for those that have never played it but should, it's been out for a few years, so this is your own fault for the spoiler that's about to hit. The Joker is in it, right? Mm-hmm. But the truth of the matter is the Joker is already dead, and he's literally in Batman's head the entire game.
Ooh.
It's really neat the way it's done. And they'll do things where you'll be panning over the environment and suddenly, like, you'll pass something and suddenly Joker's there sitting on a car. And he just starts talking in that wonderful Mark Hamill voice. And, like, when he's done talking, like, I mean, he'll interact with you. He never touches you or anything like that, which is very cleverly done. But when he's done talking or his interaction part is done, when you pan away and then pan back, he's just gone. And I'm thinking, like, with the whole Phazon thing, you can do stuff like that. Like, as I said, this isn't my genre, but I could see things like this going really well. Things that you're not 100% sure are actually there or not.
Okay. So, I've got some thoughts here.
Yeah, I'm listening.
I think we can piece this together. So, Samus ends up on a, I don't know, fuck it, we'll call it a rescue mission, whatever the MacGuffin of the day is. It
Right.
works. Ends up on, a planet with looking for a troop of Federation troopers that have, lost radio contact. They have no idea what the hell happened to them, type of deal. And starts exploring the planet, and weird shit starts happening. As it turns out, said planet is got something in the atmosphere that is tripping like visions and messing with the fear and sanity centers of the brain. So, there are some awful things like actually there, but when you get to say like the bigger boss fights, they're all full-blown hallucinations in her mind, and you can dig into like the more body horror centric bosses throughout the series, because they're all ones that are pulling from her memory, all the things and creatures and bosses that she's feared the most or are the most horrific, like Phantom, like Nightmare would be a good one to mix in there.
Yeah.
And I think too, we're gonna go with a no death mechanic here. So we're gonna wipe out the ability to actually die, because this planet is feeding on her fear. And
Well, I like it.
yeah. And so anytime you would have ended up dead or taking a fatal hit, instead of dying, you're still going at bare minimal energy, but a piece of your equipment, an ability, something like that, starts taking damage and becomes less functional or less reliable as you go. And periodically, you might hit a room or a station or a workbench of some sort somewhere where you can repair that, but you can only repair one thing. And anytime the death save happens, it's random whatever it is that takes the functionality or effectiveness hit.
Or what if, like, one of the things you can do is collect pieces of broken technology, and you can use those to repair your stuff. But the thing is, everything has to be used sparingly. Not only that, each workbench you come across only has certain tools. So not all the tools are there, which means you can't work on everything.
Right. I was just going to say, my thought was that you essentially have to pick and choose which powers and abilities you get to restore back to full functionality, and which ones you feel like you can cope with being deficient going forward. Like, you still have them and they still work, but not well.
Right.
Like space jump, for example, every once in a while maybe it malfunctions, and so you hit the button to hit your next space jump, except it doesn't go off, and so you're sitting there trying to get it to go again.
It does go off, but it shoots you the wrong direction.
Ooh, there you go. I like that too. So, but that's kind of a fun idea to play with. I like that. Do you go side scroll, or do you go first person, or do you do a pulled back third person?
I think we should do what Other M did. Like, certain parts are side scrolls, certain parts, like, don't do just the missiles are suddenly,
first person locked.
First person. No, just certain areas, like certain,
Oh yeah. You can get behind that.
Or maybe actually it gives you the option to switch between them at your discretion, but certain areas will work better in one or the other.
I could see that. That could work well.
If done right.
Yeah. I like this idea. All right, so what horrible thing on this planet is driving this whole thing? I feel like there's definitely got to be like a solid culmination here.
Spores.
I'm into it.
This entire thing is somehow related to the spore creature from Super Metroid, but
Spore Spawn, yes.
an unchecked version of it that has literally encompassed the entire planet. And the spores are so small they managed to get through her breathing apparatus.
I'm here for that.
Yeah.
You know what? As a matter of fact, there we go. You've helped lock in this story here, and you've kind of driven the thematic of what's happening in the background and the world design for me here. I'm thinking it's a Federation research outpost that's geared specifically for botany, which explains why Spore Spawn was there in the first place. They transplanted a sample for study.
You know what? Actually, I would like to see this have nothing to do with the Federation. But she goes in
Or just
firmly
some.
believing it's something
Yeah.
to do with them. So over and over, she's like, how does this fit in? This doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And like, ultimately, it's just Spore Spawn living alone, another version of Spore Spawn living out on his own, living his best life.
God. Could you imagine a Spore Spawn fight at the end that's actually souped up to be a competent final boss fight?
Right.
I could totally get behind that.
One of the phases has to be the standard Super Metroid, figure 8 pattern. Opens up occasionally to breathe. You get to get a couple hits on it.
I like this because, again, if you've got like a botany research station, a lot of the creatures and everything going around could be very plant-centric instead.
Yeah.
You can get away from the bugs and insects, creatures type deal.
All right.
And really lean into that thematic. I like
this
that
also
idea.
kind of ties into another concept. I'm a huge Transformers fan. The comics, the comics are one of the greatest stories I've ever read of anything. The Transformers comics are one of the greatest stories I've ever read, period. Not just of Transformers. One of the things they did, though, several years ago, is they had what was called spotlight issues.
Okay.
And Cup's spotlight, you remember Cup from the the animated movie? Yeah. His spotlight was one of the most interesting things. It was one of the first things I've ever seen within the continuity that basically said, this is something you've never seen before. And what it is Cup crash landed with Outback on a random planet, right?
Yeah.
And at this point, he's just trying to survive. Outback did not survive, but there is radiation on this planet that is driving him crazy. And so he's still carrying on full conversations with Outback, who half of his body is missing. And every night, after the sun goes down, the monsters show up, and they're these tentacle horror monstrosities, right? As the story progresses, you find out about the radiation and things like that, and you find out that these tentacle monstrosities are the rescue party they're sending to try and capture him, to try and collect him. And he's murdered every single one of them with Outback's left arm. It is one of, as I said, it is such an interesting story. The only way that they're finally able to get him is they send Trailbreaker in, who can force field the radiation away. It's, as I said, you really need to read these stories, man.
I do. I know. I've got the first one trade back sitting on my shelf I need to finish. But I dig that a lot, actually. I kind of like the idea that Spore Spawn is back and he's actually pertinent instead of a skippable afterthought less he's become these days.
Yeah.
So, what do we call this this green thumb monstrosity?
Oh, I don't know, some poison ivy pun.
I don't know. What about the root of fear?
All right.
Get behind this. I'm gonna have dreams about this, and it's gonna make me happy inside. I feel like this might be one that maybe this could be the first one that we end up revisiting and fleshing out further.
I could see that.
6 months down the road. I like the idea. I like the foundation of it. It's got solid roots.
I like the idea of like plant, basically like memory almost of the Spore Spawn creating plant versions of many of the other bosses you've dealt with.
Ooh,
Yeah. Like,
there we go.
imagine, a 2-story tall plant version of Kraid
Yeah.
is stuck in one room because obviously it's tentacles and he's rooted.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, I like this a lot. I'm here for it. So, well, I think that that covers us for the week. So we'll get this in the manila envelope and slip it under the door, and we'll probably eventually get a restraining order placed on us for sneaking onto their property every week. So, but I want to say thank you to my friend Michael for coming and hanging out with me this week. Thank you to everybody that tuned in, and we're going to see you all next week right back here at Phazon Labs, powered by the World 1-1 Podcast Network. Press start to engage your mind.